It may be mid-December in our Newdig Norfolk garden. And as you can see, with the right conditions, you can grow carrots most of the year. In today's video, we shall look at how to grow carrots from seed to table. Hello and welcome to the Newdig Norfolk Gardener channel, where we grow our vegetables using the Newdig method. We live in the county of Norfolk in the United Kingdom, midway between the fine city of Norwich and the coastal town of Great Yarmouth. We grow our vegetables in Zone 9A. Carrots are a great vegetable to grow. And especially if you're new to gardening, you very rarely get failures with carrots. They can be grown in raised beds, they can be grown out in the open ground. And as you saw at the beginning of the video, we sowed some here in our polytunnel only 3 weeks ago, and they've now germinated. But for most of us, we tend to grow our carrots during the spring and summer months. It's the last week of March and I'm about to sow our carrots for a summer harvest. Carrots and parsnips are the two vegetables that myself and Mrs. W direct sow. I've made drills in the soil and the rows are 6 inches apart. Being no dig, we don't see so many weeds and we don't actually have to weed so often. That's one of the features. Doesn't mean that you won't get weeds. We do get weeds, but we see less of them. But if you're not no dig and you're watching this video, you might want to leave a 12-inch, 1 foot gap between your rows. This is so that you can run the hoe between them. When it comes to direct sowing, it really is a question of experience. Or you find a Mrs. W like I've got. She's particularly good at sowing those seed. But in all seriousness, it does take plenty of practice. It won't come natural straight away because you want to sow them as thinly as possible. This is so that you don't have to go back and do too much thinning. If you can sow them without thinning them at all, even better. Before I sowed the seed, I watered the drills. I then covered the drills over, and then we wait for the seeds to germinate. These should germinate within 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what the temperature is. Once my carrots are germinated, as you can see here, I will then look to cover them, and I use EnviroMesh for this and put it over hoops. I would say, whether it be summer or autumn carrots, keep them covered. That's the best way that you can avoid the worst of the carrot root fly. From now on, these young seedlings only need watering if they see no rain every 10 days. Here in the UK, that doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. We tend to see rain. If you leave it any longer than this, and then you give them a good watering, as a lot of people will do, that's when your carrots are likely to split. And they do this because once you water them and give them a good dousing of water, they suddenly get a big growth spurt on. That's what causes them to split. The carrots that we grow in summer, I like to harvest as baby carrots. So don't let them grow too big, as you can see here. At that stage, they're very, very tasty, crunchy, absolutely amazing carrots. And what I will always say is that you cannot beat the taste of homegrown carrots. They are so much more carroty than the ones that you can buy at your stores or the greengrocers. It's mid-June and you can see that I'm sowing my carrot seeds in this vegigar raised bed. The technique is exactly the same as when sowing the summer carrots. It's no different. The difference will be is that you probably will definitely need to water the drill once you've made it, because we will be in midsummer. It will be warm and dry. This will just aid the germination at that time of year. I've already mentioned that you need to try and sow these seeds as thinly as possible. But of course, in reality, it's not actually possible to get them to the exact distances that you would want. You need somewhere between 2.5 to 3 centimetres between each carrot to get a nice large carrot. We're not likely to be able to do that in every case. But actually, I don't ever thin my carrots. Some people do to get the correct sizes that they want. I leave them to grow just as they are. I know I'm going to get some quite large ones. I also know I'm going to get some quite smaller ones. But that doesn't matter so much. As you'll see, as Mrs. W has asked me to collect some carrots. Because down in the New Dig Norfolk Gardener's kitchen, she's got a recipe that you can use these slightly smaller carrots for.
Our carrot-inspired recipe for today is from a book that my sister-in-law has lent me, and it is in fact from Mrs. Beaton's Cookery and Household Management book, and it was her dad's book, which was given to him in 1966, so it's quite an old book, and there's some fantastic recipes in here, some of which I'm sure I shall be visiting with you at a later date. But for today we are going to be cooking a carrot pudding, and it's a steamed pudding and it's a sweet pudding. So for the recipe you will need 230 grams of fresh breadcrumbs, 170 grams of butter, 115 grams of sugar, I'm using Demerara sugar, 2 eggs, 230 grams of carrot, 115 grams of glacé cherries, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and a little milk. The first step is to wash and chop your carrots, pop them into some water and put them on the hob, bring them to the boil. And we need to bring them to the boil and simmer until tender. They need to be tender enough to pass through a sieve. Now while the carrots are simmering away, I've just chopped up the butter so it's softening, coming to room temperature quite nicely in the bowl, and I have quartered the glacé cherries and separated the eggs, ready to whisk individually. While the carrots are still softening up, I'm going to start to cream together the butter and the sugar. So I've added the sugar into the butter, and you can do this with a wooden spoon, but just for quickness I'm going to use my electric whisk. The carrots are now nicely softened, so I've just strained them and I'm just going to push them now through the sieve. To make a nice carroty pulp. As you can see, I have persevered with passing it through a sieve, as the recipe book says, but in all fairness I think if I was to do this again I very probably would just pop this into a food processor, or maybe even use a stick blender and just whiz it up like that, or a ricer. If you've got a ricer you could pass it through a ricer like that, but it's going through, we're getting there. I've finished the carrot pulp, and now it's time to add the 2 egg yolks into the creamed butter and sugar. I'm just going to give those a stir around and incorporate those in. And now we simply add in the carrot pulp, the breadcrumbs, the the cherries and the cinnamon. So we give these a nice strong stir together, trying to incorporate all of the ingredients evenly. So I've mixed all of those ingredients together, and the next step is to just add a little bit of milk at a time, and we need to bring it all together to a stiff dropping consistency. I think just a touch more, but only a touch. Let's have a little test. There we go. That is how I would determine a stiff dropping consistency. The next step is to whisk the egg whites to stiff peaks. For this I'm using our electric whisk because it's just a bit quicker. Okay. There we have nice stiff egg whites. Now we're just simply going to incorporate the egg whites, fold them in. Egg whites all folded in nicely, and I have greased a 2-pint pudding basin. I'm just going to simply now add the mixture to the basin. Smooth it around the top. I've cut myself a large circle of baking paper, greaseproof paper, whichever you've got, and I'm just going to put a pleat into the middle and pop that on the top there. And just to make this a little bit easier for you in a little while when the pot is hot, if you put a piece of string as a handle, and the piece of string that you're going to tie around the bowl across, bring that over so you have a loop over the piece of string that you're going to tie around the bowl. So you tie the bowl up nice and tightly. And then the loop of string that you've got there, if you fold that over and tie that to where you made the knot on the bowl, you can make yourself a little handle so you can pick the pot out of the steamer without burning your fingers. As I said earlier, this is a steamed pudding, and I've brought my pan of water to the boil, and I'm using my mum's old steamer that just sits on top of the pan. You just pop that into the steamer there. Pop the lid on. And we now need to time that for between 2¼ and 2½ hours, checking regularly that the water is not boiling away underneath. And if it is starting to reduce, which it will, you just need to keep your kettle boiling and top it up with boiling water as you go along to keep the steam at the same temperature. So the pudding has now had 2½ hours steaming, and using my lovely little handle that we made, I'm going to lift it out without having to burn my hands or anything. Pop that down. I'm just going to cut through that looks nice, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. Just going to loosen around the edges. Hopefully that will come out nicely. Plate on top. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Oh, that's okay.
Well, that's a bit different, isn't it, Mrs. W?
It certainly is. I think it looks lovely. Sort of an alternative to Christmas pudding, possibly. Right, let's get a little dish and we'll slice a piece through.
No. So as what happened, Sasha and Adam have just called around. What do you think, Sash?
I'll let you know. It was hot. It was nice.
Is it?
It's my kind of pudding. It's like, if you like stodgy puddings,
Oh, wow.
it's the one.
Wow. That recipe book, you know, dates back to 1966. Good old Mrs. Beaton. The chief pest that affects carrots is the carrot root fly. There is nothing you can do about it. It will come. You can't spray them with anything. And in any case, why would you want to spray anything on your vegetables? We grow our vegetables organically. So the best way to do that is to cover them. You don't need to use hoops. Some people just put their fleece or their enviromesh straight over the top and just let them push it up. It's just my preference to use the hoops. I've left descriptions down in the video description of where we got our hoops and our mesh, should you wish to purchase some yourself. But it truly is the best way to ensure that you don't get this pest absolutely ruin your crops. Because if you do get it, the carrots are almost rendered inedible. If you've got it very lightly, you can cut the bits and pieces out, but again, it's a bit of a chore to do that. In the most serious circumstances where they're affected, you'll see big black holes where the maggots have actually chomped their way through your carrots, and they don't particularly look very appealing. When it comes to preserving carrots, they can be preserved in crates of sand. You can also blanch them and freeze them. Also, because we actually grow our vegetables in zone 9A, we don't get particularly harsh winters. Very rarely does that happen. And as you can see here, our carrots are still in position. We just come up here and pull them as and when we require some carrots. And if you want more tips and advice on how to grow a particular vegetable from seed to table, then watch this playlist next. We're adding new videos every few weeks to bring you the best advice on how to bring your crops to a great harvest. Have a great gardening week. We shall see you soon.